Waitress sees a billionaire's son crying alone in the park. What she does next is a game changer. What if the life you've been groomed for, the perfect life full of wealth and success, feels more like a prison than a dream? The Carter Mansion stood like a fortress of glass and steel overlooking Central Park, its towering silhouette a testament to the Carter family's billion-dollar empire. Inside, 8-year-old Lucas Carter sat at the edge of a polished mahogany dining table that stretched endlessly under a chandelier dripping with crystals. The room buzzed with the low hum of corporate talk: mergers, acquisitions, stock prices, each word a reminder of the legacy Lucas was destined to inherit. His navy blazer itched, his tie felt like a noose, and his small hands fidgeted in his lap. Unnoticed by the adults around him, Lucas' posture, his mother, Eleanor Carter, snapped. Without glancing his way, her voice sharp as the diamond studs in her ears. She was a vision of elegance, her auburn hair swept into a flawless chignon, her eyes fixed on a hedge fund manager across the table. Lucas's father, Richard, sat at the head, his commanding presence silencing the room as he outlined plans for a new tech venture in Singapore. To them, Lucas wasn't a child. He was the heir, a future asset molded to carry the Carter name. At 8, Lucas already understood his role: be silent, be perfect, be the embodiment of the family's ambitions. The Carter empire spanned real estate, tech startups, and global investments, a machine that demanded loyalty over love. Family dinners were boardroom meetings, with Lucas as a prop, expected to nod along to discussions he barely understood. His dreams of painting, of exploring the world beyond the mansion's walls, were dismissed as childish distractions. "You're a Carter," his father would say. "You don't have time for hobbies." That night, the air in the dining room felt suffocating. Lucas's eyes drifted to the floor-to-ceiling windows, where the city's lights flickered like a distant promise of freedom. When the guests finally dispersed, and his parents retreated to their study for a late-night call with Tokyo investors, Lucas saw his chance. Slipping into his sneakers, he crept out of the mansion, the heavy oak door closing softly behind him. The cool autumn air hit his face as he hurried towards Central Park, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and relief. He found his way to the Bethesda fountain, its waters shimmering under the soft glow of streetlights. The park was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of traffic. Lucas sank onto a bench, his small frame curling in on itself. The weight of his loneliness, the ache of being unseen, spilled over. Tears came first in a trickle, then in shuddering waves, his sobs swallowed by the night. In a world that saw him as a billionaire's son, Lucas felt like nothing more than a shadow. Sarah Miller jogged through Central Park, her sneakers pounding the path in a steady rhythm. At 27, she was no stranger to long days. Her shift at the Blue Moon Diner had been brutal: 10 hours of juggling trays, dodging rude customers, and enduring her manager's endless complaints. Growing up in a cramped Brooklyn apartment, Sarah had learned to survive on resilience and determination. After losing her mother to cancer at 16, the park was her sanctuary, a place to outrun the bills piling up on her kitchen counter, and the dreams she'd tucked away to make ends. Meet. As she neared the Bethesda fountain, a small figure caught her eye: a boy on a bench, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. His expensive clothes, a tailored blazer and polished shoes, looked out of place in the dim park. But it was the raw pain in his posture that stopped Sarah in her tracks. She'd seen that kind of hurt before in her own reflection, in the kids she'd grown up with in her neighborhood. She couldn't walk away, slowing her pace. Sarah approached cautiously, her breath still heavy from her run. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Lucas flinched, his blue eyes wide and red-rimmed as he wiped his face with his sleeve. "I'm fine," he mumbled, his voice cracking, the lie as fragile as the leaves crunching underfoot. Sarah sat on the far end of the bench, giving him space. "You don't look fine," she said gently. "I'm Sarah." "What's your name, Lucas?" he said after a pause, his gaze flickering to her. There was something in her eyes, warmth, not pity, that made him hesitate. He wasn't used to strangers caring enough to ask. "Rough night, huh?" Sarah said, leaning back, her tone light but kind. "I come here when I've had one of those. This fountain's got a way of making things feel a little less heavy." Lucas didn't respond, but he didn't run either. They sat in silence, the fountain's gentle rush filling the space between them. For the first time in years, Lucas felt a flicker of something new. Someone saw him. Not the Carter heir, but just Lucas, a boy who was hurting. Sarah didn't push, didn't pry. She just stayed, her presence a quiet anchor in the storm of his emotions. Over the next few weeks, Lucas found himself drawn back to the park whenever the mansion's walls closed in. He'd sneak out after dinner, his heart racing as he slipped past the security cameras and the staff who barely noticed him. The Bethesda fountain became his refuge, and Sarah, miraculously, was often there, jogging or sitting with a book after her shifts. Their chance encounter grew into something steady, a quiet ritual that anchored Lucas's chaotic world. They talked about small things at first, the way the fountain's water caught the light, the squirrels that darted across the paths, but soon Lucas opened up, his words spilling out like water from a cracked dam. He told Sarah about his parents, how they treated him like a chess piece in their empire, how family gatherings felt like corporate audits. He confessed his love for painting, how he'd hide his sketches under his bed because his father called art a waste of potential. Sarah listened, her eyes steady, her silence a safe space. She shared her own story in fragments, growing up in a neighborhood where gunshots were lullabies, losing her mother to a disease that drained their savings, working double shifts to afford community college classes. Money doesn't fix everything, she told him one chilly evening, her breath visible in the air. I've seen rich folks just as miserable as poor ones. Happiness comes from people who get you, who make you feel like you're enough. Her words struck Lucas like a revelation. He'd grown up surrounded by wealth, yet he'd never felt enough. Sarah taught him small ways to reclaim his voice, how to say I need a break when his parents pushed him too hard, how to write down his feelings when they felt too big to hold. She even suggested he talk to a therapist, someone who could help him navigate the expectations crushing him. You're not just the Carter heir, she said one night, her voice firm. You're Lucas, you get to decide who you are. Lucas clung to her words, his sketches growing bolder, filled with vibrant colors instead of the dark, angry lines he'd drawn before. Sarah, too, felt the impact of their bond. Lucas's trust, his unguarded vulnerability, reminded her of her own strength. She'd spent years feeling like she was just scraping by, but helping Lucas made her believe she could be more. Eleanor and Richard Carter noticed the change in their son, but it wasn't the transformation they wanted. Lucas was less obedient, more willing to push back. He'd started asking for time to himself, refusing extra tutoring sessions, even questioning their plans for his future. It unsettled them, their carefully controlled world tilting off its axis. When they caught him sneaking out one night, they hired a private investigator to tail him. Determined to root out the source of his rebellion, the investigator's report hit like a bombshell. Lucas was spending time with a waitress named Sarah Miller, a woman from a working-class background with no wealth or status. Eleanor's face turned ashen as she read the file, her manicured nails tapping the desk. This is unacceptable, she said, her voice cold. He's the Carter heir. He can't be associating with someone like her. Richard was more direct. She's a distraction, he said, his tone final. We'll put an end to this. They confronted Lucas in the mansion's study, a room lined with leather-bound books and awards that screamed success. Who is this Sarah? Eleanor demanded, her eyes narrowing. What could you possibly gain from spending time with a waitress? She's my friend, Lucas said, his voice trembling but defiant. She listens to me. You don't. Richard's laugh was sharp, cutting. You're right, Lucas. You don't get to choose your friends. Your job is to prepare for the empire, not waste time with someone who's beneath you. The words stung, but Lucas stood his ground. She's not beneath me. She's the only one who cares about who I am, not what I'm supposed to be. The argument escalated, with Eleanor threatening to enroll him in a boarding school abroad and Richard vowing to cut off his access to the park. Lucas felt the walls closing in, but Sarah's voice echoed in his mind. You're allowed to choose who you wanted to be. He wasn't backing down. Just when Lucas thought he'd found a foothold in his fight for freedom, the ground gave way. Charles Wentworth, a family friend and one of the few adults Lucas had trusted, betrayed him. Charles, a slick lawyer with a penchant for currying favor with the Carters, had overheard Lucas talking about Sarah during a rare moment of vulnerability. Sensing an opportunity, he leaked the story to a tabloid, complete with exaggerated details and grainy photos of Lucas and Sarah at the fountain. The headlines exploded. Billionaire's son rebels with park waitress. Carter heir slumming it with gold digger. The tabloids painted Sarah as a scheming opportunist, a woman using a vulnerable child to climb the social ladder. Paparazzi descended on Central Park, staking out the diner where Sarah worked, shouting questions as she carried trays of coffee. Her co-workers whispered behind her back, and her boss, a gruff man named Tony, warned her that the media circus was bad for business. "Fix this, Sarah, or you're out." He growled. Lucas was devastated, his safe haven shattered. The betrayal cut deeper than the headlines. Charles had been someone he'd trusted, someone he'd thought saw him as more than a pawn. At home, his parents' anger reached new heights. "You've humiliated us," Eleanor said, her voice shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what this does to our reputation?" "I don't care about your reputation," Lucas shouted, tears streaming down his face. "I care about Sarah. She's my friend, and you're trying to take her away." Sarah, meanwhile, faced her own battle. The tabloids dug into her past, twisting her struggles into a narrative of desperation. They called her a dropout, a nobody, ignoring the years she'd spent rebuilding her life after her mother's death. But Sarah refused to break. One evening, as the paparazzi lingered outside the diner, she found Lucas waiting by the fountain, his face pale and drawn. "They're lying about you," he said, his voice small. "I'm sorry." Sarah knelt in front of him, her hands on his shoulders. "They can say what they want." "Lucas, I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." Lucas threw his arms around her, his sobs muffled against her jacket. "I don't want you to go," he whispered. "You're the only one. Who cares?" As the media storm raged, an unexpected ally emerged. Mrs. Evelyn Harper, Lucas's art teacher at his private school, had noticed his talent long before Sarah entered his life. A kind woman in her 60s with a passion for nurturing creativity. Evelyn had kept Lucas's sketches when his parents dismissed them as frivolous. She'd seen the pain in his eyes, the way he poured his heart into his art, and she'd quietly encouraged him to keep creating. When the tabloid scandal broke, Evelyn reached out to Lucas, offering her support. She invited him and Sarah to her small studio apartment, a cozy space filled with canvases and paint-splattered furniture. There, Lucas found a new refuge, a place where he could paint without judgment. Evelyn taught him techniques to channel his emotions into his work, and Sarah, watching him flourish, felt a spark of hope. Evelyn also had a secret. She'd known Lucas's grandfather, William Carter, a man who'd disapproved of Richard's ruthless ambition. Before his death 2 years earlier, William had confided in Evelyn about his fears for Lucas. Trapped in a family that valued profit over people. "He's a dreamer," William had said. "Don't let them crush that." Inspired by Evelyn's encouragement and Sarah's unwavering support, Lucas began to paint a series of vibrant, emotional pieces, scenes of the park, the fountain, and Sarah's warm smile. Evelyn entered his work in a city-wide youth art competition, keeping it secret from his parents. When Lucas won first place, the local press covered the story, a rare positive headline amidst the tabloid frenzy. For the first time, Lucas felt seen for something he'd created, not for his last name. Emboldened by his small victory, Lucas decided it was time to confront his parents head-on. He asked Sarah and Evelyn to join him, knowing he'd need their strength. The confrontation took place in the Carter mansion's study, a room that felt like a battlefield. Eleanor and Richard sat behind a massive desk, their faces a mix of anger and disbelief as Lucas stood before them. His voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "I'm not your heir," he said, his words cutting through the silence. "I'm your son. I want to paint, to have friends, to be happy. And I want Sarah and Mrs. Harper in my life, because they care about me, not your empire." Eleanor's composure cracked, her eyes flickering with something like guilt. "Lucas, you don't understand the sacrifices we've made for you," she said. "This family depends on you." "No," Lucas said, his voice rising. "You depend I'm me to be something I'm not. I deserve to be loved, not used. Richard slammed his hand on the desk. You're 8 years old. You don't get to dictate terms. Then I'll leave, Lucas said, the words surprising even himself. I'll find a way to be free. The room fell silent, the weight of his defiance hanging in the air. Sarah squeezed his shoulder, and Evelyn gave him a nod of quiet pride. For the first time, Lucas felt like he was fighting for himself, not just against his parents. Days later, a lawyer contacted Lucas with staggering news. His grandfather, William Carter, had left him a secret trust fund worth $50 million. Accessible when he turned 18, the trust came with a letter, written in William's shaky hand. Lucas, my boy, I built this empire for freedom, not chains. Live for yourself, not for them. Choose your own path. The trust was a lifeline, a way for Lucas to escape the Carter empire without losing everything. But the final twist came when he uncovered a deeper betrayal. His parents had hired a firm to investigate Sarah's past, planting lies in the tabloids to paint her as a threat. They'd orchestrated the media frenzy, hoping to scare Lucas back into submission. The revelation shattered any remaining loyalty he felt toward his family. He vowed to leave their world behind, no matter the cost, with the trust fund's promise. On the horizon, Lucas and Sarah began planning a future free from the Carter empire. Sarah's dream was to open a community center in her Brooklyn neighborhood, a place where kids like Lucas and like she'd been could find support, creativity, and belonging. Lucas, inspired by his grandfather's letter, wanted to help make it happen. They enlisted Evelyn's help, her experience as a teacher guiding their vision for a space that nurtured both art and emotional healing. The media storm eventually faded, replaced by stories of Lucas's courage and Sarah's selflessness. The art competition win had shifted public perception, and a grassroots campaign on social media started by kids in Sarah's neighborhood rallied around the billionaire boy who chose heart over air. The Carters, humiliated by the backlash, retreated from the spotlight, their control over Lucas broken. One spring afternoon, Lucas and Sarah stood by the Bethesda fountain, sketching plans for the community center. Lucas's pencil flew across the page, drawing a building filled with color, light, and life, a place where no one would feel invisible. Sarah watched him, her heart swelling with pride. You're gonna change the world, kid, she said, ruffling his hair. Lucas grinned, his eyes bright with possibility. We're gonna change it together. The community center opened a year later, a vibrant hub in the heart of Brooklyn. Lucas's paintings lined the walls, each one a testament to his journey from loneliness to hope. Sarah ran the center, her warmth and resilience drawing kids from every corner of the neighborhood. Evelyn taught art classes, her gentle guidance, helping young dreamers find their voices. Lucas, now 9, still faced challenges. His parents hadn't given up entirely, sending lawyers to contest the trust fund and pressure him to return to the fold. But Lucas was no longer the scared boy by the fountain. With Sarah and Evelyn by his side, he'd found a family that chose him for who he was, not what he could become. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Lucas and Sarah sat on the steps of the community center, watching kids laugh and play inside. I used to think I had to be what they wanted, Lucas said, his voice soft. But you showed me I could be me. Sarah smiled, her eyes glistening. And you showed me I could be more than I thought. The park stretched out before them, the Bethesda fountain glowing in the distance. For Lucas, it was no longer a place of tears, but a symbol of the moment his life changed, the moment a waitress saw a boy crying alone and chose to stay together. They'd built something greater than any empire, a legacy of love, courage, and the freedom to be themselves.